Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa usalli wa usallim ala sayyid al-awwaleen wal akhirin nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and thank Him for the gift of life and the ability to reflect upon His mercy and His guidance. And we are looking at Islamic revival. We are looking at not a reform of Islam to meet the standards of the 21st century, but how Islam was revived over the century, and to look at an actual methodology of revival. So this is not just a theoretical look at great revivers, but it is a practical exercise in how to bring back the principles of Islam, to bring them to life, and to be relevant to the circumstances that we are living in. And this is so important to us today, especially in the year 2019 that we are in, where the Muslim world is finding itself under attack. And Muslims are finding that it's a great struggle that is going on. There is positive and negative, but Allah blessed us with great potential. Allah blessed us with wealth, numbers. Allah blessed us with strategic position, with beautiful masjids, with Islamic knowledge and tact. And a lot of times it depends upon how you look at things. For instance, if you said Islam in Russia. Now generally people in the West, when you think about Russia, you will think about the communist bloc and, a dark, gloomy place, and everybody's in the gulags of Siberia and whatnot. And no doubt, Muslims suffered within the Soviet Union. But the reality is that even Russia itself, as a country which has divided itself off from some of the big countries like Kazakhstan and whatnot, it is said that within a year or two, Muslims will make up about 1/3 of the population. So that's Russia itself. And if you travel to Russia, from what I've heard, there are beautiful masjids. And to a certain extent, with Islamophobia raging in places like the United States, it's safer to be Muslim, in Russia than it is in Florida or in Texas, and probably in Paris. And so it all depends upon how you look at things. And so one of the great changes that Muslims have to go through is more of a psychological, attitudinal change, our attitudes. And with this change in attitude, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates the circumstances. And we should have husn al-dhan billah. And so this is called, in Islamic tradition, the best opinion or belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you have husn al-dhan billah, you believe that Allah wants for you the best, even when a tragedy strikes you. And we saw in the hadith of the unique Muslim that, ajaban li amril al-mu'min, that the believer, everything is good, because when they're struck with a difficulty, they have patience, and when they're given blessings, they show gratitude. So each type of circumstance can be good for a true believer. That is the unique situation that we're in. So this psychological attitude change, which really is sort of a foundation of the revival itself, it displays itself in a hadith reported by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu anh, that when the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, used to send out one of his companions on a mission, he would say to him, Bashiru wa la tunafiru, yassiru wa la tu'assiru. So he would tell his companions, Bashiru wa la tunafiru. Give glad tidings, bushra. Think optimistic. Don't be negative. Tanfir is negative, driving people away. This is haram and that is haram, and you are bid'ah and you are unbelievers, and whatever, always looking at things in a negative way, like looking at a glass of water, half filled. Is it half empty or is it half full? right? Half full is a positive thing, but half empty is negative, because you're talking about empty. So he would tell them, be optimistic, be positive. It's a win-win situation. Either we win in this life or we win in the hereafter. And don't drive people away. So you see people who are doing things slightly different than you. Don't drive them away. Invite them. Try to understand them. Show them what the truth of the Islamic message is. And then he told them, yasiru wa la tu'asiru, and that is make things easy, taysir. So make the religion easy. Don't make it difficult. And you'll see sometimes with some students of knowledge who just got a little bit of knowledge and whatnot. So everything is haram and bid'ah. It's an innovation. And so their whole life is spent on searching for bid'ah. And you come into the mosque and they're looking at your pants. Is it slightly below your ankle? They're looking at your beard. How long is your beard? Did you cut it in a certain way and whatever? And in some Muslim country, I want to say which one it is, they gave a command and they said, every man in this village, you got 2 weeks to grow a beard. If you don't, we're going to give you lashes. We're going to punish you. Now imagine if there was somebody from Malaysia or Indonesia living there who can't grow a beard. They don't have hair on their facial hair, right? But they said to people, you got 2 weeks. Now fortunately for them, they're the type of people whose hair grows constantly. So if you don't shave it, within 2 weeks you're going to have scraggles, you're going to have something, right? That's negative. Why don't you come in and you show the beauty of the sunnah, right? And how men all over the world, historically would grow their beards, how the Prophet ﷺ, would grow his beard and said, this is sunnah. And when a Christian man came to him with a handlebar mustache, the Prophet turned away from him in type of disgust and said, no. The Christian said, this is what we do in our country. And he said, no, we trim our mustaches and we grow our beards. That's our way. Okay, so he showed this positivity, in growing instead of negative, just coming down on people. So this hadith is a very important one. You'll see many circumstances in your life where people are going to extremes and where they're being negative, their approach is negative. And when you see that, we need to remind our brothers and sisters, take it easy. The sister embraces Islam and she wants to put on a niqab. So she wants to cover her face. Okay, fine. You want to do as some of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ did. There's nothing wrong with that. But as a new Muslim, you will grow in stages. Right? You will grow in stages into the deen until you are able to take on certain levels within Islamic practice. Right? And it's not always necessary to do certain things. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, then basically is showing us that Islam is an easy way of life. Okay? So this is part of the revival. The revival is not a forced purge. As the Chinese now, they want to put people in concentration camps, the Uyghur Muslims, supposedly to give them new training, like to condition them and whatnot. This is not what Islamic revival is. Okay, and this is a positive thing. Another aspect of the revival is that we are living in times where there are many new issues that are coming at us. And especially with the rise of the internet and the social media, we are facing challenges that were not faced by people in the past. And in this light, it is a general fiqh principle, because our fiqh is our understanding. And the Prophet ﷺ, on a hadith reported by Abu Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anhuma, he told his companions, "Da' ma yuribuka ila ma la yuribuk, fa inna sidqa tum'aniyya wal kadhib riba." So he said, leave that which is doubtful for that which has no doubt. Truth is reassurance, right? Mutma'in, okay? And lying is doubtful. And they say that, a liar, most liars have poor memories. And if a person is living in a lie, then it's difficult to tell the truth. And eventually, if you're listening closely to the liar, you'll catch them in the lie, because it's not truth that they're talking about. So the whole issue of bringing falsehood is a doubtful thing. And so part of the revival is to have as much solid thinking as we possibly can, okay? To stay away from uncertainty and doubt. And this is the area where you have, in Islam, you have halal, which is permissible, and makruh, which is hateful, and then you have haram. Right? These are some general parameters. And sometimes in the area of makruh, things that are hateful, there's some doubt. And really for the higher level of Islam to be safe, then, many times we have to leave some of the things, that are makruh, that has doubt inside of it, for those things, which, have no doubt. And there may be some incidents that come in your life, and it may vary from person to person. I mean, I can remember being in Medina in the early, this is back in the 70s, and new Muslims were there from America and different parts of the world, and they used to have these restaurants, and you have these thatched, chairs, and you sit up there, and you drink tea, and you eat your food, and whatever. So they introduced non-alcoholic beer, okay, which is now widespread, but that they introduced non-alcoholic beer, and they put it in a bottle that looked like a beer bottle, okay, and so one of our brothers, we came walking along and saw one of our brothers sitting there, and he's drinking this non-alcoholic beer, and we just looked at it, and something was just not right about this. There was something just not right. And we spoke to the brother about that, and of course he had the argument, it's halal. There's nothing wrong with this, okay? But in his circumstance, where he used to drink beer in Jahiliyyah, in ignorance, right? And he's now got the beer bottle, and he's drinking something that tastes like beer. It's hops. Hops, the grain, is a taste that's not natural for people. So when most people drink beer, they first spit it out, because it doesn't taste nice, okay? But you get used to the hops, and the more you get used to that taste, you start liking the hops. And so by drinking this non-alcoholic beer, he's getting the hops taste. So it's coming back, plus the way he looks, and he's supposed to be a student of knowledge, and he's sitting now with a beer bottle in his hand. You see, so there's something doubtful about this. So we could not say to him that it is haram what he has done. However, what we could say is that there's doubt inside of what you're doing. And as a safety mechanism, anytime we see doubt in an issue, it is better to leave it. It is better. Unless there's an absolute necessity to do something, then you do it because it's a necessity. But if there's no necessity, generally as a principle, we try to stay away from doubtful things.
I want to consider the four rivers of Jannah. One of it is wine, and why can't we wait until we get there to participate?
Right, one of the rivers is wine, right? Non-alcoholic wine, whatever. There's no getting high, in paradise or anything like that. But this is something to think about, because there's a lot of new things that are coming now. Should you do it or should you not? You got a headache, should you buy some marijuana? Because you got a headache, right? And some people will say, well, it's an argument, man, because when you take codeine or you take some of the other drugs, it's a drug. So you're literally taking a drug. If you took a high level of codeine, you'd be high. You would literally pass out. And you're taking some of it in order to relieve the headache. But the doubt in the marijuana is the culture of marijuana and what it leads to, right? And so the fact that, it leads to these things, and especially the form that they're taking it in, most of them are not going to take pills. They're going to smoke it, right? So they are right back in a dangerous area. See? So the whole issue of staying away from these doubtful things, this is a very important, part of the Islamic revival. Okay? Any questions anybody have on this about uncertainty and about things that may, appear to be doubtful? So again, the areas that we're covering now, each area is one of discussion. And by having these traditions with you, you will see that many circumstances you will come into that you'll have something to say. You'll have some sort of prophetic guidance for Muslims, how to hold on to their deen, in the times that we are living in. And this really is the crucial part about revival itself. That, revival doesn't take you 1,400 years, away from, reality, right? What it does is it brings the principles that were revealed 1,400 years ago, right, and allows you to practice them today. This is the challenge, that we are facing in the Islamic revival. Okay, so these are changes in attitude. They're changes in attitude and changes in the way that we actually approach the religion itself. And this is important to us in an individual sense, in a family sense, community, and as an ummah. And there are certain key issues that are inside of this text that I believe are essential for the success of the believers. And if we don't take these steps, it doesn't look like we will be the ones who will actually be carrying the banner of Islam to the highest point, that Allah will raise up somebody else. And one of these issues is the issue of brotherhood. And when we speak of brotherhood, sisterhood, we're talking about, again, an attitudinal change, a change in the way that we look at ourselves in relationship to other Muslims. And in this light, this is a tradition which is reported by one of the companions, Jarir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anh. And he gives his input into what he was taught by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this, again, hadiths are things that companions even said, but, and when the Prophet heard it, it was not rejected. And in this case, it's an extremely important tradition, because Jarir is basically saying, Bayatu Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ala iqam as-salat wa ita'i zakat wa nush li kulli Muslim. And so he said, I pledged my allegiance to the Messenger of Allah to establish prayer, to pay zakah, or the charity the poor do, and sincerely support all Muslims. Now, this is extremely important, because today, in the Muslim world, despite the fact that we are 26% of the Earth's population, to a great extent, we are communities. And even here in Toronto itself, when the issue of September 11th came up and some other big issues, and when the society now looks at the Muslims and want an answer, the reality is, and they say, who speaks for the Muslims? And the reality is, we are not one monolithic group, right? But we are communities. So there are different Muslim groupings here. And we have similar principles, but we are different Muslim groupings. And even Christians themselves cannot say this, because there are Catholics and Protestants and all types of Christians. But this is something that we have to come to grips with. Because the Prophet ﷺ and his companions were able to overcome differences, despite the fact that his companions were sometimes Arab from Quraysh and other groups, sometimes from Al-Habasha, Ethiopia, sometimes from Persia, sometimes from Yemen, different places. They formed one solid group. And Jarir is saying that his sincerity, the word is nusх, and that's like nasiha. So it's another form of nasiha. So it's nusх. And in this case, it is sincere support to all Muslims, kulli Muslim. So he did not say Quraysh Muslims, Arab Muslims. He did not say Muhajirin and Ansar, no. He said all Muslims. And this is one of the companions. So what he says is coming from the best generation. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was blessed with an answer, ijabah to dawah. His dawah was responded to. And this is part of what is called al-Kawthar. Inna a'tainaka al-Kawthar. The abundance that he was given. So people responded to the call. And so within 100 years, Muslims had reached the gates of China. They were far north in Russia. They were deep in the Swahili coast. They had gone all the way across to the Atlantic Ocean. This is in 1 year, 100 years. And there's no other religion, no other way of life that has spread as rapidly as this. And not only did it spread that rapidly, but the places that it went to, it stayed. So up until now, if you look at that first 100 years, where it went to, most of those places make up heartlands of Islam. So 1400 years, an ideology, a way of life, this is ijabah to dawah. It is a response to the call made by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So Jarir is confirming that all of the Muslims, all the people who take Shahada, the people of Qibla, who pray to the Qibla, who are Muslims, I will try to sincerely support all of the people. After the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, as Islam began to spread, and so rapidly, you would find in certain cities that there would be a small group of Sahaba. So the companions in many places were only small because small detachments went to different areas. People were embracing Islam without force, so you don't need thousands of soldiers to keep beating them and forcing them. No, they wanted this. And so they would go to the companions in order to find out, how do I pray? How do I fast? What did the Prophet ﷺ say to you? So their sayings to the people, right, along with the Quran, which was, being read as revelation, and the Mus'haf, the Quran of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anh, that was united Quran from all the different readers, right? The standardized Quran. So along with that, the companions were teaching. And so in the different areas of power, you could say, like for instance in Iraq, the area of Iraq, Tigris-Euphrates region, right, in that region, and then Persia and over toward Turkey, and then in Egypt, along the Nile and whatnot, that's another group, and then you have North Africa. You have North Africa and this region, Andalusia, and then you have the Arabian Peninsula itself, especially the center of Arabia and the Emirates and whatever. You have different areas. So in order to codify the teachings, to teach to a large group of people, if you have 1,000 people who want to learn to make salat, okay, you need to have a way to teach them. You got to have a method. And that method got to be systemized because they're not looking at the Prophet ﷺ pray and pray like him. The original companions prayed as they saw him pray. Okay? These people who are coming in, they have to learn how to pray. So therefore, some of the key teachers were the ones who actually were able to codify it. And because so many people related to these teachers, their teachings were adopted by rulers of areas. So the rulers in certain areas adopted these teachings. And they became what we now know as the school of thoughts, the madhab. And there were many different schools, but there were four in particular, that were taken on by rulers and people in vast areas. And so they became known as the four great schools of thought. But the schools of thought themselves were not actually made for nationalities. In other words, Abu Hanifa was in Iraq because Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anh, when he took over as the Khalifa, he made the capital of Islam Kufa in Iraq. That became the political capital of Islam. And Abu Hanifa lived in Kufa. And many of the Sahaba were in Kufa. Some of the oldest one, like Anas ibn Malik, radiallahu anh, they say he's the last one probably to die, the oldest of the Sahaba. He was in his 120, 30 or something like that. And, so he was in the Iraq area around Kufa. So the leaders in the area there took on Abu Hanifa's teachings because of his abilities and his acceptance by the people. Imam Malik was a great teacher of hadith in Medina. He was in Dar al-Hijrah. And although he was originally from Yemen, he spent most of his life in Medina. And one of his students, who was an Arab, who came from the community in Mecca, and then came to, although he originally they say he was from Gaza, which is in Philistine. So then but he came with a group, from Mecca, and when that group came to Imam Malik, then the leader of the group said, "We have a young boy here, and we want you to teach this young boy." And they said, "The Amir of Mecca is asking you to do this, or commanding you to do this, because of the brilliance of this boy." Okay, and Imam Malik did not follow political leaders. That's how he was. So he just turned them away. And they said, "Please, the Amir is asking you." So he said, "Bring the boy." So he sat with the boy. After a short while, he said, "Put this boy in my study circle. I want this boy." And this was Imam Shafi'i. So that's the Shafi'i school of thought, where he mastered Imam Malik's teachings. And then he went to Iraq, learned Abu Hanifa's teaching. Abu Hanifa wasn't there at the time, but he learned Abu Hanifa's teachings. He improved, he made some changes to Imam Malik's teachings. He was based in Cairo, Egypt. And it is from the Red Sea area that the teachings of Imam Shafi'i spread up the Nile into the Sudan area, and then Yemen, and then east coast of Africa. And along with the trade routes, it went to Indonesia, and in India to Kerala. You see on the west coast of India is Malabar and Kerala. So all the areas where the trade routes went, this is Shafi'i school. Okay? And, but he was an Arab, and he was a student of Imam Malik. So this is not a separate church or a separate masjid movement, different. No, he's a student. And he was only giving his opinions. He did not say, "Follow me, don't follow Imam Malik." That's his teacher. So he never said this. Imam Ahmed came up, living in the area of Iraq and Arabian Peninsula. A great scholar of hadith. He had a huge volume, probably the largest volume of hadith, the Musnad of Imam Ahmed. He stood for Islam when there were philosophers and whatnot trying to change the religion. Imam Ahmed took a strong stand, and he was punished for this, but he held his position. And he's one of the great imams also, so people love his teachings as well. Okay? So this is just some of the stories of these teachers. That's all they were, was teachers and students of each other and whatnot. But when Islam spread to the areas, and the people who were learning it, for instance, in India and Pakistan and Turkey, they're learning Hanafi. So they learn the Hanafi teachings. Now, after a few generations and centuries go by, the people in that area start to look at the Hanafi teachings as part of their nationality. So if you are a person from that area, then you will pray like them, and you will follow teachings like them. Okay? the Shafi'i teachings become part of the teachings of people in Egypt, and then in Somalia, East Africa, and Indonesia, Malaysia, and whatnot. And if you are coming from those areas, you're more than likely Shafi'i. The Maliki teachings, although Imam Malik was in Medina, his teachings rapidly spread across North Africa, because that was one of the first major areas that they were taking. Amr ibn As in Egypt, and then right across to Morocco and into Spain. So the Muwatta, his book of Hadith, which was the first book of Hadith, spread to that area. So Moroccans and West Africans and what was Andalusians, they're Malikis. The Hanbali school in Iraq and then in Arabia, Kuwait, and those areas there, these are basically Hanbalis. And you'll see different parts of the world following. Okay? These were never made to divide us. The intention of this is only to explain from the point of view of another teacher. Okay? But what has happened is people have taken these things almost as their nationality. And I can remember, and again, we're talking about these traditions, right? I can remember being in the Jami Mosque of Toronto, and this madhab thing, the school of thought. How are we going to pray together? Okay? The only way we can solve this is to say, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray as you have seen me pray. So if the Prophet came out of ruku and raised his hand, then that's permissible to do. If he didn't sometimes, that's permissible. If he was sitting in jalsa and he went like this and pulled it back fast, or he held it, or sometime like this, they're all permissible, because he did it in different ways and different times. You see? So we learned to appreciate each other. But every once in a while, a wave of people would come along and say, you have to follow your madhab. If you go against it, you're committing a sin. Like it's something really wrong. And people start dividing up, and I couldn't control myself. And I stood up and I said, Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, he was not a Pakistani. He was an Arab. And I said, Imam Shafi was not a Somali or a Yemeni. He was an Arab. So this is not your national identity, right? These are only teachers of Islam. So these divisions, these differences, with an attitudinal change, you will appreciate somebody doing something slightly different. Because one day, if you have a fatwa from an imam, that might help you to be able to do something. And you can do it. If it's based on a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, you can follow it. I went to a masjid in the Caribbean, and we prayed Maghrib, and the imam said, Wala Dali, and I said, Ameen, and I was the only person in the masjid. And when they finished, they said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, where is that shaitan? Where is he? And they came, surrounded me, and I said to them, get Bukhari hadith. And they got the hadith, and it read, the companions said Ameen so loud, it shook the building. And they said, we never knew that. We never knew that. You see? So the attitude of the teacher was a division type attitude, an ethnic division, power, whatever his problem was. Right? But the revival needs this type of spirit. Nus li kulli Muslim. Helping and supporting all Muslims. So any school of thought, any teacher, we support them. Also, when Islam spread to different parts of the world and political situations had, movements developed. A movement developed in India and Indo-Pakistani area. The people had lost their the spirit, of Islam. They had all the institutions, but the spirit was gone. So Maulana Ilyas, came along in the 20th century, and they developed a group that would bring the spirit back to all of the masjids and the community. It would be a moving group to help people love the Sunnah and to travel, to bring back that spirit. And that is the group they say Tabligh Jamaat. Okay? And it was a perfect solution to a problem the people had at that time. There were people in other areas in Arabian Peninsula, and it happened in West Africa, where they got so many different superstitions and, twists in the religion, that there were movements developed in order to struggle against innovations, bid'ah. So they struggled against innovations. In some areas, the Muslims, had aspects of Islam, but they did not have Islamic government. They had Meccan period, but not Medina period. So movements developed to try to show how to, reach the evolutionary stage of Islamic rule, which we had in Turkey for 600 years, the Khilafat. So movements developed around the Khilafat issue. And not only just in Turkey, in India too, the Khilafat movement was a major movement in India and Arabia and other places all around the Muslim world. So these movements were perfect for their time and their circumstance. The problem is now you come to a place like America, Canada, Europe, and people are coming from these movements which were good in their environment, but maybe irrelevant in the other environment. Okay? And they're meeting people from the other movements. Now, how do you deal with the people from the other movement? If you have the attitude of division, splintering, hair splitting, as they say, then you will say, no, my movement is the right movement. This is the way of the Sahaba, right? If you have the Sahaba's way of looking at things, it's like Sharia. So he will support all the groups. He will support the Tabligh groups who go out and bring people to the mosque. He will support the education groups who believe in tarbiyah, education. He will support, the groups that want Islam, in the Muslim world, to take hold in the land. He will support all of the different groups. People who like dhikrullah, they want your heart to be clean. That's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? These are Sufi movements, you could say. So what you have today is Sufi, Salafi, Ikhwani, Tablighi. You have all these different names. Okay? I believe, honestly, that in the revival, we have to drop these names. And there was a very courageous Sufi leader. I'm not going to say his name to get into any things. And he came to South Africa, and I went to one of his programs. I knew him, one of his talks. And, he said that we need to develop an Islamic village, and we put the Quran and Sunnah in the middle. And how you pray, what you do in your house, your movement, that's up to you. But anything for the community, it's the Quran and the Sunnah that will decide. And we learn to live together. That was a very powerful statement. That is revival. That is what we need. We need to have the spirit that Jarir radiallahu anh was talking about to support all of the movements. And this is not an easy thing to do, and for many in the older generation, it's almost impossible. But the younger generation coming up, who will live in the future, right, who will have the revival, inshallah, this is the attitude, is what we call operational unity. Operational unity. And that is where you look to your brother and sister for their strengths, and you help them in their weakness. So in other words, the example that we use in many cases is the example of Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh. And Khalid embraced Islam late in the Meccan period. And he was a great warrior. He was one of the worst enemies of Islam in the beginning. But when he embraced Islam, Muslims were so thankful to Allah because he's a great military leader, Khalid. Okay, but he didn't have time to learn a lot of Quran. So he just knew the short surahs. He's most of the time in the battlefield. Okay, but you have Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, who is a thin Yemeni man. He's there from the beginning of the revelation. He becomes a master of the Quran. And they say that, the one who reads the Quran most like Rasulullah is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And he looks like him and acts like him more than anybody else. Okay, so he's a master of the book. And he said himself, I was there for, when all the revelation, because he used to be the servant, he made him like a servant to the Prophet. He used to carry his cane, he used to do different things for him, stay around him, even sleep by his door. So when revelations were coming, he's there. So he said, I knew where all the revelations are, and the things I didn't know, I went to somebody who knew. So he's a master of tafsir. So when it's time to pray, the Sahabas would then look for Ibn Mas'ud. He would lead salat. And Khalid ibn Walid, who's 6-foot warrior, now prays in back of this short Yemeni man. Okay? So the Yemeni man, that short person, who's not a big warrior, is his leader in salat. Right? But when the enemies of Allah came along, everybody turns and says, where's Khalid? Now you put him in the front. You see the difference? Because that's his strength. This is operational unity. What did Khalid do? Did he make a group called Hizb Khalid? Did he do Tariqa Khalidiyya? Did he do Madhab Khalid? No. He was just one of the Muslims. That's the attitude we have to have for the revival. That whatever your strength is, you're just one of the Muslims. Because you do something better than somebody else doesn't mean you deserve all the leadership and everybody should follow you in everything that you do. No, the area you're good in, then they should follow you. But the area you're weak in, you take the leadership from somebody else, even if it's a sister, even a woman, you will take the leadership. That's what we need in the revival. And this is an essential. This part here is really important because disunity is one of our biggest challenges. When we are united, we are a mass. We have so much potential. But when we're divided, we're just little isolated communities. Little isolated communities. So this area here is of crucial importance, and it's one that we have to work at, break down differences. When we were there in the Jami Mosque, Allah blessed us that we had all the different groups, Islamic movements, and people had halaqas, they had circles and whatever. But when it's time for salat, everybody prays together, and people learn to enjoy each other and to see other ways of praying and then appreciate it and learn something about the Sunnah. And it breaks down tribalism, and differences. But it's something which, it's a mental block where somebody feels that if they go outside of their madhab to do something to another, then they're doing something wrong. This is a mistake. And I want to give you an example. Like I said in the prayers, in the Sunnah, and the companions used to say Ameen out loud. In the Hanafi school of thought, they say Ameen silently. Malikis also generally say Ameen silently. They have a choice. But, so you have a choice. Okay, so now if a Hanafi person who follows Imam Abu Hanifa is in a Jamaat where the majority say it out loud, and he says Ameen out loud, did he do something wrong? This is the question, right? There are some who will say, you did something wrong, you broke your madhab, right? But look at what's happening now. Abu Hanifa is a teacher under the Prophet ﷺ, and a follower of Abu Hanifa follows the Prophet. So did he do something wrong? No. He did not do something wrong. The madhab guides you. You have a formula for making prayers. You don't want to do all kinds of things and get yourself confused. And the people in your area are praying like that, so you don't want to be strange in your group. This is how we teach our children, our community, we're organized. But when we are in different communities, we learn to appreciate people of other madhabs, and also different movements. We appreciate different Islamic movements. I want to open up the floor for any questions that anybody may have about this. This is operational unity. This is big.
I just wanted to read about the Quran. I mean, all in the fiqh, the Abu Hanifa, they will say, if you find the hadith, that's my mother.
That's right. Yeah, and not only that, they said, إِذَا صَحَ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي. If you see the hadith, if you find it, that's my madhab. And Imam Malik one time was in Medina, because that's where he lived most of his life, and he was near the grave, and he said, everybody in religion makes mistakes. He said, except this man. And he pointed to the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. But other than him, we make mistakes, we're correct and we're wrong. Another one said, if you see something that I did wrong, throw it against the wall. That's what the Imams said themselves, right? Instead of looking at their way of praying and acting as though it's like a church, right? And so you start looking at yourself different than those other people, right? That's a division. And that's, an evil thing, which is, like a form of division and tribalism. We break it down to the spirit that Jarir is saying of Sahaba. We support all Muslims. We're sincere to everybody, okay? Regardless of, how they do. If they're making a mistake, help them to find how to do it right, right? Instead of criticizing. And what I found, to be honest with you, from being around leaders and seeing a lot of communities, is that many times the division that comes is more of a racial thing or a tribal thing than it is actually the school of thought. It's because they don't like those people. It's not because the school of thought, because if they go into their imam's teachings, you can't find that. But how they interpret it to you makes you think that that's what it is. You see? So this is an attitudinal change that the movement will have to go through, especially our leaders, in order to come out of the divisions, that are crippling the Muslim world and even crippling smaller communities that we have. This is revival. That's going back to the original spirit. Any other general questions anybody has concerning anything in this part?
In this past 10 to 30 years, we have been battling with this ignorance idea, right? Ignorant idea. Tabligh is not good because they are doing this, which is again. No, you are not good because that's all we have been doing all that time. But we have been forgetting that solid hadith, right?
That's right.
They are our brothers.
That's right.
And we need to support.
You sincerely support.
Yeah.
So this is why, again, these hadith that I put together, it's after years of traveling into different communities and trying to find something that would solve their problem or deal with their situation, right? And this is essential. This concept is operational unity. It's very important, especially for issues that we think. Look at Ramadan coming up now, Eid, like there's 2 or 3 moons in the sky, whatever. There's no need for that, right? If you have unity. But it's not the schools of thought. It's not fiqh. Fiqh will even show you sometimes there's more than one way to do something. But you decide for your community, when you have leadership, you decide this is our methodology. And you follow that. And if an extreme circumstance comes up, you can follow another ideology. If it's a mujtahid, a person who's on that level of making religious decisions, and they've done it, you could follow it. Right? But again, it's the shura. It's the shura of the Muslims. It's the consultation, right? And the leadership that solves the problem. Those who try to argue the school of thought, you are arguing, like what's first, the egg or the chicken? Right? What's first? Was there a chicken first or an egg? What do you think? Was there first a chicken or was there first an egg? Think about that. If there was an egg, where did it come from? Had to come from a chicken, right? But if it was a chicken, it came from an egg. So we can go back and debate over and over and over again. You see, it's something similar to this that you start to get in, and it's used by the shaitan to create division.
The problem is every group finds some of their supporters and they become a bigger group, and then they all follow that. There's a Hilal committee, and there is a Crescent committee, and then there is calculations. Mm-hmm. So everyone has a group that follows them.
Right.
So although there is they're all coming together, but again within a point of view. There's larger leaders, a few of the leaders coming together, again within the same opinion. They're not accepting the general opinion and coming together with all of the people.
That's right. And unfortunately, many times it takes tragedy or it takes a crisis for us to be united. When the crisis comes, September 11th or whatever it is, we're all at the meeting. Some big things happen, we're all, there. It shouldn't be that. We should all have the unity before the crisis.
Like last Friday.
Right, like last Friday, people, unite and drop their things, but they should realize that unity should already be there. So when the crisis comes, we have an organized way to respond.
2 months down the road, same thing's going to happen again for Ramadan.
It's coming. I mean, one year, like I said earlier, one year the founding of the Hilal Committee originally was a unity of all the groups. We had a big meeting, and everybody was there, and we had a heart-to-heart, and we decided we're going to come together. We had everybody, all the movements. We had the Tabligh, Deobandi, we had the Salafi types, we had Isna, we even had a Nigerian scholar, we had all the schools of thought of the Ahl Sunnah wa Jama'ah. And we formed a committee, and the committee came together, and we decided on a neutral middle road position that would satisfy everybody. And we found it. Right? And we took that position, and we started Ramadan together. But the problem is, as the month, now you're fasting, and now Eid Mubarak is coming, right? And that's the power, is the Eid, right? And then, it's a long story, but, it's a classical type of situation, where we decided that the whole of North America is our horizon, anywhere all the way to the West Coast, and down to South America. I mean, this is a bigger horizon than even people who have horizons usually take. They don't take a big one. So in a sense, it was almost like universal, right? And so we took this type of thing. It's a middle road position. But the problem was, it was wintertime, and the way that salats come in, after Isha, people want to go to bed. Are we fasting tomorrow or are we not fasting? Right? And no sightings. Saudi Arabia, of course, cited, but they didn't want to accept that because it didn't make sense in terms of calculation. Middle of the night, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, people are screaming, phones are ringing, make a decision, make a decision. I'm saying to the brothers, wait to the West Coast. The West Coast had not sighted. And they said, no, there's too much, the evidence shows they're not going to be able to see. Don't. Let's just make the decision, finish. So after a while, we couldn't take the pressure. And we said, okay, based on what it is, we're fasting tomorrow. And we announced, right? And then I went home. It was deep snow. I drove home from the Medina Mosque. That's where the meeting was. And I drove home. I was living in Oakwood, St. Clair area. And I drove home and then, laid down. And about 2 in the morning, my mother-in-law came in, who was not a Muslim at the time. And she came and she said, there's a crowd outside. No, before this time, I got a phone call around 2. This is how it went. And it came through one of the groups, and they said 2 Arab brothers saw it on a mountain in Idaho, or something like this, right? And I said, okay, we already made the decision. They said, no, one of your groups is breaking. They're going to break fast. They're going to have Eid tomorrow. They're accepting it. I said, but we made a group decision. You see, I was the Emir. We made a group decision. Okay? They broke. News is circulating. Fortunately, we didn't have internet at that time, but it was enough for telephone calls that it started spreading. So then I called the headquarters of this group, and I said, let me have the phone number of the brothers. And I talked to them, and they convinced me that they saw it. They convinced me. Okay, so I said, this is deep. So I called, some of my brothers, Indo-Pakistani brothers, and they said, Brother Abdullah, we trust you, but you can't trust Arabs. Don't trust Arabs. And they said, Assalamu alaikum, we'll see you after Eid. I contacted the Arab brothers, and they said, look, the Pakistanis, they can't speak Arabic, man. Don't trust them. Okay. Then I contacted some brothers who are Arab and Indian and other, in-between brothers, good brothers. And they said, trust your heart. Make a decision. Right? We're not sure, make a decision. So I contacted a few middle people, and we decided that we would break fast. But it was 3 in the morning, man. And now, at 3 in the morning, now, if you're renting a stadium, and you already told them that you're not going to be there the next day, their crew is not coming, man. So but the fiqh tells us we have to break. So we broke. And, I laid down with a headache. My mother-in-law knocked on the door and said, there's a crowd outside the door. And I said, are they Muslims? She said, yes. So I went downstairs and they said, Brother Abdullah, we want to hear it from you. I said, Eid Mubarak. It's Eid. We're convinced. So they said, MashaAllah. But the problem was, I noticed that it really was, the hearts were divided and they didn't follow leadership. They did not have operational unity. You see? And that was the problem. So we came very close, but that final thing, that final demon was still inside. Right? And the next generation has to overcome this. They have to overcome this in order to really make the revival. Because when we're united, we are a powerful nation. And we can do what we want to do in the name of Allah. But if we're divided, we're just different groups, and sometimes the groups will end up fighting each other, more than the other people who are fighting them. So this is a very important part of the Islamic revival. And if there's any other questions and comments anybody has concerning this?
The groups that are there, the youth, they cannot, they have been grown by the same group, the elders of their families, and they're being grown from them,
Yeah.
so, and the mentality is not changing.
Right, but I mean,
Very rarely.
at least in the younger generation, I notice, because of social media,
Some of them.
they read other people's texts. See, before, the only way you're going to get knowledge is go to the masjid under the Maulana and read the book from him, right? Now with social media, you will hear lectures, you will get hadiths, you will get knowledge from other people. But still, it's allegiance. Their parents want allegiance, but in their hearts, they know there's other things.
That's the problem.
So we're only hoping and praying that, when the generation goes, who's holding it back, the younger generation would be open-minded enough to make the revival.
The problem is the older generation keeps coming from back home and maintains that status quo.
Right.
That's another issue.
Yeah. But, inshallah, Allah is most merciful, and circumstances and the right intentions, things can change. We have this ability to change within us and to follow leadership. So we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would help us to unite ourselves and clear our hearts and give us the best. You had a question anyway? No. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I want to see if I understand this.
Right.
This allegiance is to the individual before it becomes collective.
Mm-hmm.
So if a Muslim is sincere,
Right.
they'll be more concerned about their actions more than the other's actions.
Right.
So let's say you said salam to someone and they didn't answer you back.
Right.
It's one of my biggest peeves.
Right.
It is my responsibility to keep saying salam, not because it was an answer, but because that's my responsibility fulfilling the
That's right.
Sunnah of Rasulullah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like if the Muslim society would stop thinking in a group mentality and start taking themselves responsible for their own action, we would be closer to a step forward, because no one looks themselves in the mirror and tries to fix themselves, but they're very quick to fix everybody else.
Right, so that's very important. So that's why we say in the Islamic revival, it starts inside with the niyyah. right? And then it goes to the heart. That's individual first, and then family, and then group, right? And then when it comes like that, it evolves into something bigger.
Yeah,
You see?
You have to keep focusing on yourself.
That's the way it has to
No one
be.
can see you're doing this.
That's
for
right.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, it has to be an individual mentality
Mhm.
for it to benefit another.
That's
Because
right.
The moment you look at the other person's action, khalas, you're finished.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens. I mean, when it evolves naturally, you naturally will reach the group, but it's not by force,
Yeah.
right? But it will naturally, eventually go to the group level and then go to the nation state level. But that takes time. And when the character is built properly and Allah wills it, then it can happen.
Yeah, so
Right?
I feel like that this generation, we need to strengthen their character more than giving them this inheritance of you're Somali or you're this.
Right.
Just strengthen the Islamic akhlaq and leave the rest on the
I mean, it's a balance. They have to have know their identity. They obviously have to know. But it's not the main thing. In other words, we don't do things because I am Pakistani or Somali or Arab. That's not the reason why we do it. We do it because of Allah and His Messenger. However, this is my family. I know my roots, right? But if that real reason, if the principles are there above, then we can be successful. So we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would help us and would unite the Muslims together. I leave you with these thoughts. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.